Ever heard of the Forgotten War? It's a conflict that reshaped the world, created a border you can see from space, and technically has never ended. Today, we're diving into the short, brutal history of the Korean War. Picture this, it's 1945. World War II is over. Korea, which had been under Japanese rule for 35 years, is finally liberated. But freedom comes with a catch. The victorious allies, specifically the Soviet Union and the United States, decide to split the Korean peninsula in two, right along the 38th parallel. The idea was temporary. The Soviets would oversee the north, the Americans the south, until a unified government could be formed. Spoiler alert, that never happened. Instead, two separate states emerged, each with a radically different ideology. In the north, you had the Communist Democratic People's Republic of Korea, led by Kim Il-sung, backed by the Soviets. In the south, the Capitalist Republic of Korea, led by Syngman Rhee, backed by the Americans. Tensions between the two were sky high. Both leaders dreamed of reunifying Korea, but on their own terms and by force if necessary. Then at dawn on June 25, 1950, the world changed. Around 75,000 North Korean soldiers stormed across the 38th parallel. They were well-equipped, well-trained, and they caught the South completely by surprise. The South Korean army crumbled, and within days, the capital, Seoul, had fallen. It looked like the entire peninsula would be communist in a matter of weeks. But the United States and the newly formed United Nations saw this as a direct challenge from the communist bloc. They couldn't let it stand. So a UN coalition, dominated by American forces, was sent to intervene. This wasn't just a civil war anymore. It was the first major armed clash of the Cold War. The first few months were a chaotic back and forth. The North pushed the UN forces all the way down to a tiny corner of the peninsula, called the Pusan Perimeter. Just when it seemed like all was lost, U.S. General Douglas MacArthur pulled off one of the most audacious military moves in history, an amphibious landing at Incheon, hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. It was a massive gamble, and it worked spectacularly. The North Korean supply lines were cut and their army was shattered. The UN forces retook Seoul and pushed the North Koreans all the way back, almost to the border with China. Victory seemed certain, but then came the twist. China, fearing a US-backed nation right on its doorstep, issued a stark warning: don't cross the Yalu River. MacArthur ignored it. In late 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese volunteer soldiers flooded across the border, launching a massive counterattack that sent the UN forces reeling back south in a brutal, freezing retreat. What followed were 2 more years of horrific, grinding trench warfare, eerily similar to World War I. Hills with names like Pork Chop Hill and Heartbreak Ridge were taken and retaken, costing thousands of lives for just a few feet of ground. Finally, after 2 long years of stalemate and bitter negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. But notice I said armistice, not peace treaty. It was a ceasefire. The fighting stopped, but the war never officially ended. A new border was drawn, the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, a heavily fortified strip of land that remains the most militarized border on Earth to this day. The Korean War left a devastating legacy. Millions of civilians and soldiers were killed. Families were torn apart, many of whom have never seen their relatives on the other side since, and it solidified the division of Korea that we still see today. A stark reminder of a war that's anything but forgotten.